Sundays are always better when we gather together to inspire one another on our respective journeys. As many of you know, this weekend is the Westside Campout, where many of our members commune with nature and with one another in East Texas. I'm always a little sad when they're not with us, but there is no doubt in my mind that these campouts are wonderful opportunities for Westsiders to become better acquainted. They always hold a Sunday service while away, so they are with us in spirit. They are thinking of us as we think about them. If you're someone who enjoys camping, be sure to look into the opportunity of attending next year. I think you'll find that you will spend a weekend with some mighty fine people. Well, I don't know about you, but I love the responsive reading we recited together by Marge Piercy. By all accounts, Piercy is a wonderful poet and novelist, someone who understands and knows her way around words. She has another reading in our hymnal I also love, titled "To Be of Use." And in a very real way, Marge Piercy's readings in our hymnal remind me of this time of year. Yesterday, I saw my first television commercial for Christmas, even though we are 2 months away from that holiday. I titled this reflection, "'Tis the Season." And as close as we are to the traditional holiday time of year, with Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and Christmas and Kwanzaa and Yule and winter solstice and others I'm likely ignorant about, I'm not referring to the holiday season at all. I'm referring to this political season we find ourselves in right now. One that will be coming to a close very shortly, really in just a few days from now. If my candidate wins, I'll be glad this particular political season is over and done with. Though I think it reasonable to say the political season hardly ever ends these days. In order to stay in or gain office, enormous amounts of money is needed to compete. Fundraising really never stops. Those with money are often glad handling with other wealthy people. It's no coincidence, I'm convinced, that most of our members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are of the moneyed class. Now let me say before I go much further, that Unitarian Universalists are often considered to be very liberal, progressive people who those on the right believe are so open-minded that we allow our brains to fall out. But just in case you don't know, to try and classify all Unitarian Universalists as any one thing or another, whether theologically or politically, is dangerous indeed. So within our walls, you will find those with conservative beliefs and those who are more libertarian. Wherever we are on the political spectrum, it may be a time of hope for some of us right now. But I must say it is increasingly a time of despair for me personally. My ideas and values are only fleetingly addressed by only a few candidates. And then, when I get my hopes up, I'm told to wait. There are bigger issues which must be addressed first. Now, I will never hold elected political office, so I will never know the realities of serving constituents outside of a congregational setting. I'll never know what it's like to see firsthand the machinations of what it means to be in the place of an elected official. So I'm almost always hesitant to pretend I know what should be done and when within the maneuvers of politicians. Yet that does not seem to stop me from wishing things would move faster, that we would progress at a quicker pace toward ideas that seem inevitable to me anyway. So there is a saying I hold on to, which I've likely mentioned before. It comes from one of our Unitarian ancestors, the Reverend Theodore Parker. He said something that was later adapted and made famous by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Parker said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." I believe that too, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but that it bends towards justice. Not only do I believe it, but I count on it. In fact, if it weren't for this belief, I might disengage from the process completely. The reason I don't is because I also believe it is rare that you can change just about any system by leaving it. Whether it be a system as small as a church or as large as a nation, changes do not occur when those who desire change stop engaging. So I trudge along, doing the best I can, knowing that changing any behemoth system takes time, it takes patience, and with the understanding that I may not see the change at all. Yet knowing that the arc does bend towards justice, I stay in it, sometimes more engaged than others, but hoping to help in the small ways I can, particularly with progress in the areas of social justice. Now, it can all seem so disconcerting, so disappointing. We seem so disillusioned at times that we will just assume our elected officials are lying to us much of the time. We find it difficult to trust them, and this, I believe, can have dire consequences. Like the time when a busload full of politicians driving down a country road, and the bus suddenly ran off that road and crashed into an old farmer's field. The old farmer heard the tragic crash, and so he rushed over to investigate. He then began digging a very large grave to bury the politicians. A few hours later, the local sheriff was driving past the farmer's field and noticed the bus wreck. He approached the old farmer and asked where all the politicians had gone. The old farmer explained that he'd gone ahead and buried all of them. Were they all dead? Asked the sheriff. Well, some of them said they weren't, said the old farmer. But you know how them politicians lie. Now, I know that was not a very good joke. I will tell you, though, I like to try and find something that makes us laugh every now and then during a reflection, but it is difficult, my friends, to find political jokes that are not offensively partisan or downright crude these days. This says something, in my opinion, about how deeply divided our country seems to be when even the jokes seem so hateful. But anyway, I've been reading a book recently by the social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. Haidt was educated at the University of Pennsylvania and Yale University. He taught for many years at the institution of higher education founded by Thomas Jefferson, the University of Virginia, and has just recently moved to New York University to set up a new program examining complex social issues. His area of expertise is moral psychology. Now, you may have seen Jonathan Haidt giving a TED Talk or two. You may have seen him on C-SPAN's Book TV or Bill Moyer's program on PBS. Or, like me, you may have caught him on the Colbert Report. Haidt's latest book is titled The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. I thought the book was excellent, and I highly recommend it to you for some, what I believe to be, very insightful reading. It's packed full of information, and I'll not attempt to give you all of the worthwhile points, But since we are in this election season, I will tell you something of Haidt's ideas on political differences. What was most helpful to me is that Haidt does not take political sides in his book. He offers understanding and holds out the belief of thinking like a liberal and thinking like a conservative is beneficial. In fact, Haidt often tells those interested in his work that he started out, like many do in academia, as very much left of center on the political spectrum. Actually, he wanted to help the left gain political superiority in elected office. But he has since come to believe that those who hope for change, most often liberals, and those who desire stability, who are mostly conservative, are like the yin and yang of Taoism. Each is needed in order to make a society whole. Now, whether you agree with that assessment or not, I think you will find this to be interesting. In this book, The Righteous Mind, Haidt believes that all human beings have within us 6 moral foundations. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to briefly outline these for you. The first moral foundation is that of care and harm. We have innately within us, no matter the party affiliation, the desire to care for other human beings and keep them from harm. We may disagree on how to do this and the extent to which we will extend a helping hand, but we all want to care for one another within the context of our tribes and nations. The second moral foundation concerns fairness and cheating. We desire justice within our groups for all those concerned, but it is also important that no one cheat the other. When cheating does occur, the cheater must be punished. Again, there are disagreements, and in this moral foundation, the disagreements center around the extent to which we should punish and what offenses deserve punishment. The third moral foundation examines liberty and oppression. Group members determine the amount of intervention organizations or institutions can exert power on or over the people. Loyalty and betrayal constitute the fourth moral foundation. The tribe or nation decides who is in the group, the insiders, and who will be left out on the periphery, the outsiders. The fifth moral foundation is one that deals with authority and subversion. We decide what will be given respect and authority within the group and what will be viewed as seditious. And finally, the sixth moral foundation confronts sanctity and degradation. What does the community believe to be pure behavior and actions, and what actions are deemed to be offensive? Now, like I said, Haidt believes we all have each of these moral foundations innately within us. And he believes these foundations are much the same for political and religious ideologies. But in each of these foundations, progressives and conservatives translate the ideas in different ways. If, for instance, we were to look at the moral foundation of fairness and cheating, a progressive might think it more fair to provide a safety net for those in society who have fallen on hard times or who have been born into circumstances that very well could limit their ability to pull themselves up by their imaginary bootstraps when they cannot even afford shoes. On the other hand, someone who self-identifies as conservative might believe the people offered a safety net should only be covered for a limited amount of time enough to purchase those boots by which they should then be able to pull themselves up by. At some point, though, the net should be withdrawn, they say, so as to provide an additional incentive. Someone who self-identifies as a liberal may flinch only slightly when the American flag is burned. A conservative, however, often views this as a direct offense on their sense of loyalty, not to mention their ideas of sanctity and degradation. While these may not be the best of examples I can glean, I think you get the point. There are at least two very different views within the same moral foundation for progressives and conservatives, but then Haidt decides to go a little bit further. And he says those who self-identify as liberal are mostly interested in the first two moral foundations, those being care and fairness. Conservative people are invested in all six of the moral foundations. So conservative politicians have many more options by which they can evoke support from the people. The idea of freedom or liberty or staying within the framework of authority does not seem to have the same effect on liberals as it does conservatives. So then when you know to listen for it, when you actually listen to the speeches and the political pundits and understand the chord it strikes in some people, then the more I think these ideas of Jonathan Haidt begin to make sense. These are not just buzzwords, but ideas that resonate deeply with people depending upon their political leader. And so here we are. 'Tis the season. It may be a great time of joy for you as you watch the drama play out once again, or it may be a time of despair as you watch the continually aggressive jousting that seems to get worse every year. I know from very personal experience that it is easier to forget about the worth and dignity of another who disagrees with me. It's easier to get into the mindset that this is all about us versus them. It's easier to walk away. It's easier to give up rather than continue to struggle in the mud that comes from differing points of view. Now, I often say this all the time about us here at Westside, that we're all in this together, and I believe that's true. We'll disagree sometimes. We'll have very different ideas of what ought to happen and who should do it. But on an even wider national scale, within the United States, we are all in this together. So, go vote. No matter which or how many of the moral foundations you believe to be most important, engage the process and be counted. Early voting begins tomorrow in Texas. Hopefully you're already registered and there are plenty of locations to accept your ballot. If you happen to go to the sub-courthouse on Old Granbury Road, you'll likely see several Westsiders who are staffing the early voting process. This process may not be as easy as that described by Marge Piercy in our responsive reading. But pretty soon, this political season will be over, and we can then go on to the next. You may celebrate the election because your candidates won, or you may be very discouraged because your candidates lost. But try. Try as best you can to be in it for the long haul. Remember that though the arc of the moral universe is long, it does bend towards justice. As we rise together, allow your spirit to join in singing our closing hymn number 113, Where's Our Holy Church?